Right, let's dive in, shall we? Today, we're going deep on AI agents.
Ooh, yeah.
AI agents, and all the buzz around them right now, like what they are, all these different levels of, uh, you know, autonomy we keep hearing about, and of course the big question, right?
Hmm.
Is it a good idea to even be developing fully autonomous agent, ethically speaking? I mean,
Right.
and for this deep dive, our main source, it's a paper.
Okay.
Catchy title: Fully Autonomous AI Agents Should Not Be Developed. Straight to the point.
Yeah, they don't mince words there.
And what's interesting is this comes from researchers over at Hugging Face.
Hugging Face, yeah. They're kind of a big deal in the AI world these days. So when they talk, people listen. It
Exactly.
makes you really sit up and take notice.
Right. These aren't just some, armchair philosophers here. These are people on the front lines building these systems, and they're saying, hold on a second, maybe we need to think twice about this whole full autonomy thing.
Yeah, it's like they're in the thick of it, so their perspective carries a lot of weight, you know?
Okay, so first things first, before we get into all the ethical debates and all
Yeah,
that,
sure.
can we just, define what we're even talking about here? When we say AI agent, I mean, I keep hearing this term thrown around. Is there even a clear definition that everyone agrees on?
Yeah, that's part of the problem, right? The paper actually points that out right away.
Okay, good. I'm not the only one confused then.
No, no, not at all. It's like everything is being called an AI agent these days. You've got your simple chatbots on one end, and then, these complex systems managing all these tasks.
Right, right.
It's all lumped together. So to sort of bring some clarity, the paper puts forward a definition. They say an AI agent is computer software systems capable of creating context-specific plans in non-deterministic environments.
Okay, so I think I get the gist of that.
Yeah,
But, for our listeners who aren't deep in the AI jargon world,
sure.
can you break that down a little bit? What does that actually mean in practice?
Okay, so imagine you ask an AI agent to, let's say, plan a trip for you.
Right.
A basic chatbot that might just give you some links to travel websites.
Yeah, just like a glorified search engine, basically.
Exactly. But a true AI agent, this is where it gets interesting. It would understand your preferences. It would look at okay, what kind of flights, hotels, what's this person into, figure out the best options, and then actually book them for you. Add them to your calendar. And the real kicker is it can adjust its plan if things change, like a flight gets canceled or a hotel's full. It can adapt on the fly.
So it's not just about following a set of instructions. It's about figuring out how to actually achieve a goal, even if the circumstances change along the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's that ability to make decisions, to adapt. That's what sets a true AI agent apart.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Now, the paper also talks about these levels of autonomy, right?
Yeah.
Like how much freedom an AI agent has to make its own decisions. That seems super important.
Yeah, absolutely. They have this 5-level scale. It goes from, very basic to, well, potentially pretty concerning, I guess you could say.
Okay, let's hear it. Walk us through these levels.
Okay, so level 0, that's basically your simple model output, right? Like your chatbot just spitting back a response, nothing fancy. Level 1. Now the agent can start to do some routing of tasks. So deciding which app to use based on what you ask it.
Okay, still pretty basic.
Yeah, still pretty basic.
What happens as we go up?
Things get more interesting. So level 2, now agents can choose and use tools.
Okay.
So imagine a system that automatically pulls data from a spreadsheet to, create a report for you.
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
Starting to get a little more futuristic here.
Yeah, it starts to get real. And then level 3, this is where we start seeing those more complex workflows, like that travel planning example I was talking about before.
Okay, now we're talking.
Right. But then we get to level 4, and this is the big one. This is where things get a little intense. Fully autonomous AI agents.
Dumped.
Right. And this is hypothetical still. But these agents, they could write and execute their own code, meaning they basically have free reign over whatever systems they're connected to. And that, as you can imagine, raises some serious red flags.
Yeah, that's where it starts to get a little scary, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a little bit. Because it's not just about what they can do, it's about what they choose to do.
Right, with potentially no human oversight.
Exactly.
So level 4, that's kind of the crux of this whole paper, right?
Yeah, because at that level, the potential risks, they get pretty significant.
We're talking about things like safety, security, privacy, all that.
All of that and more. The paper argues that a fully autonomous AI agent, it could make decisions that are unpredictable, decisions that could put human safety at risk. It could be vulnerable to security breaches. Like, imagine someone hacking into an AI that controls critical infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the privacy implications. We're talking about AIs having access to potentially massive amounts of personal data.
Okay. I'm already getting chills just thinking about that.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider, and the paper dives into all of this in detail.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We've got a lot more to unpack here.
We do.
But for now, let's just sit with that for a minute, folks. Let that sink in.
Yeah. But before we, spiral into existential dread or anything,
Yeah.
it's worth pointing out that the paper doesn't just, lay out the problem and then leave us hanging.
Okay, good.
Right. They do offer some solutions, some ways to think about mitigating these risks.
All right, give us some hope here. What do they suggest?
Well, one of the things they highlight, it's a historical parallel, actually. And it really drives home the point that, this whole idea of ceding control to autonomous systems, it's not just a theoretical concern.
Okay, I'm intrigued. A historical parallel. Lay it on us.
So they talk about these near-miss nuclear disasters
What?
caused by faulty autonomous systems.
Wait, hold on. Faulty autonomous systems almost caused a nuclear disaster.
Yeah. Back in 1980, there was this incident at NORAD. A computer error basically made it look like there was a massive Soviet missile attack coming.
Oh, wow.
And it almost triggered a full-blown retaliation. Like, we were this close to nuclear war.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it was a really close call. And it only got averted because, at the very last minute, you had some humans who stepped in and were like, hold on, something's not right here.
So this isn't some science fiction scenario.
No, not at all.
We've actually seen how badly things can go wrong.
Exactly. Even with systems that aren't, full-blown AI, but they're still autonomous, making decisions on their own. And that's why this paper is so important. It's like a wake-up call. Hey, we need to be really, really thoughtful about how we develop and deploy these AI agents. So getting back to those solutions they offer,
Yeah, please.
one key thing they recommend is clearer definitions and categories for these different AI agent levels.
Okay, so making sure everyone's on the same page about what we're even talking about when we say AI agent, what level of autonomy we're dealing with. That makes sense. What else?
They also talk a lot about the need for robust human control mechanisms.
Like kill switches, override systems, that kind of thing.
Exactly. If an AI starts behaving in a way that's harmful or even just unexpected, we need a way to pull the plug. Or at least, take control back.
An emergency brake for AI. I like it.
Yeah, something like that. And then another thing they stress is clear boundaries for agent operation, making sure they stay within certain predetermined parameters.
So not just making sure they can't do bad things, but making sure they don't even try to.
Right, setting rules, guidelines, and making sure those are really solid. Not something that AI can easily, outsmart or work around.
Which, if we're talking about AIs that can write their own code, that's going to be a challenge.
Right. It's definitely a challenge. But the paper argues that it's a challenge we have to address if we want to develop these agents safely, responsibly. And it's not just about technical solutions either.
Oh, okay. What else?
They also talk about the need for open and honest conversations about the ethics of all this.
Bringing in the philosophers, the ethicists, the social scientists, not just the computer scientists.
Exactly. We need to consider the broader societal impact of these technologies and make sure we're developing them in a way that aligns with human values.
Because it's easy to get caught up in the, cool factor of AI.
Yeah.
And forget that it's not just about what we can do, but what we should do.
Right. It's not just about pushing the boundaries of what's technically possible. It's about making sure those possibilities are used for good, which, that can be subjective. What's good for one person might not be good for another.
Exactly. That's where it gets really tricky.
That's where those conversations about values come in, right? As a society, what kind of future do we want to create with AI? Do we want agents that are primarily tools? Or do we want to give them more autonomy? What are the trade-offs? These are not easy questions.
No, not at all.
But they're questions we can't afford to ignore.
And this paper, at least, it gives us a framework for starting those conversations.
Exactly. It gives us a way to think critically about those different levels of autonomy and the risks and benefits that come with each level.
And it also raises the question, if we're not going full speed ahead with level 4 autonomy, then what? What's the alternative? Does the paper offer any guidance on that?
Well, They don't lay out like a step-by-step plan or anything, but they do highlight some principles, some things to keep in mind as we move forward.
Okay, now listening.
One big one is transparency.
Transparency, yeah.
Like, we should be able to understand how an AI agent is making its decisions, not just, taking its output as gospel.
Right, no more black boxes. We want to know what's going on under the hood.
Exactly. And that might involve, using techniques like explainable AI, where the AI can actually, give you a rationale for its actions.
Ah, so it can explain its thinking.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then another key principle they emphasize is alignment.
Alignment with what?
With human values.
Right, right. Making sure the AI's goals, its objectives, they're actually in line with our own.
Yeah.
And that it's not, optimizing for something that could ultimately end up being harmful to us.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, that sounds like a pretty tall order. How do you even begin to ensure that an AI understands human values?
Yeah.
Those can be so complex, so nuanced.
It's a big challenge for sure, but there are a lot of smart people working on it. And one approach is to, use machine learning, right?
Yeah.
Train AI systems on data that actually reflects those values. Ethical guidelines, legal codes, even literature and art.
So, teaching AI about ethics by having it read philosophy books.
It's one idea, yeah.
That's pretty wild.
The key is to find ways to, translate our values into a language that AI can understand.
It almost sounds like we're trying to teach AI to be more human.
In a way, yeah. But it's not about creating AI that thinks or feels exactly like us, right? It's more about making sure it understands and respects our values,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't experience them in the same way we do.
Right. Okay. So if we can do that, we can build these agents that are transparent, understandable, aligned with our values. Maybe then we can start to think about exploring those higher levels of autonomy without, completely freaking out.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism, I like that. But, it's important to remember that this is all a process. AI is constantly evolving. We need to be constantly adapting our approaches to make sure it stays beneficial.
So it's not just about getting the technology right.
No.
It's about getting the ethics right, too.
Absolutely. And it's not just the responsibility of, the researchers and developers. It's something we all need to be thinking about, talking about, engaging with.
Because this isn't just some abstract futuristic issue. This is something that's going to affect all of us. And we all have a role to play in shaping how it unfolds. So to our listeners out there, don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and demand that this technology is developed in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Well said. And if you want to dive deeper into this, I highly recommend checking out the full paper.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a read. Until next time, folks, stay curious and keep diving deep.